If you weren't playing Chrono Trigger or FF6, plenty of people assumed you weren't playing a real RPG at all. Here's the problem with that. Some of the best RPGs the Super Nintendo ever produced came out in the shadow of those two giants, sold poorly enough to never leave Japan and vanish completely. This list is everything Square, Enix, and half a dozen scrappy studios were making at the exact same time. This is a game built entirely around a girl who finds a ring, frees a djinn, and has to grant him exactly 1,000 wishes before he's free. Arabian Nights follows a good-hearted orphan who stumbles onto a ring housing Ifrit, king of the jinn, sealed away by his former master. As it works toward fulfilling that 1,000-wish debt, you travel the desert freeing other imprisoned jinn, each one joining your party once rescued. The fantasy is pure collector's discovery. Every new djinn you free feels like unlocking a new piece of a much bigger, stranger mythology, wrapped in some of the most vibrant, colorful art the SNES ever produced this late in its life. I went in expecting a shallow Aladdin knockoff, and came out surprised by how much personality she has. She's stubborn, funny, and nothing like the passive princess archetype I assumed I'd get. The middle stretch, though, repeats its structure hard. Free a djinn, get a crystal, move to the next region, repeat, and if you're not charmed by the cast, that loop wears thin fast. Released 1 week before the Nintendo 64 launched in Japan, this game never stood a chance commercially, but it deserved a much longer life than it got. This is an RPG that hands you control of its own villain. And the first thing he does as a playable character is walk into a small town and kill nearly everyone in it to absorb their souls. Dark Half splits its story between a paladin trying to stop an ancient evil, and that evil reincarnated, both burning through a shared pool of soul power that drains with every action and kills them outright if it runs out. You alternate chapters between hero and villain, watching the same world shift depending on whose eyes you're seeing it through. It plays with moral inversion, genuinely inhabiting the antagonist perspective in a genre that almost never lets you do that, watching the aftermath of your own atrocities from the other character's eyes in later chapters. I remember being stunned that a mainstream Enix-published RPG let me, and asked me, to slaughter innocent NPCs as a core story beat, something I still haven't seen replicated quite this directly anywhere else. The saves are brutally limited, usually 1 checkpoint per chapter, and the game actively punishes exploration and experimentation in a way that feels almost hostile by design. It's uncomfortable, it's mean, and it's one of the boldest narrative structures the SNES ever attempted. Here's a weapon system I haven't seen anywhere else. Instead of buying new gear, you pay a blacksmith to upgrade the same weapon over and over, and at level 20 it transforms into something with its own unique special attack. Dual Orb II follows a young warrior chasing down 4 elemental crystals to save his kingdom, using a straightforward turn-based system elevated almost entirely by that weapon forging loop. Every coin you save goes toward pushing your blade 1 step closer to becoming something legendary. It emphasizes patient mastery, watching a weak starting sword slowly transform, upgrade by expensive upgrade, into a weapon that finally feels like it belongs to you and nobody else. I remember grinding gold for what felt like hours just to hit that level 20 threshold on my first weapon, and the payoff when it finally unlocked its special attack made the whole grind worth it instantly. But outside that weapon system, the game plays its safe, generic fantasy plot, forgettable dungeons. Nothing here will surprise you narratively. It actually got sold as an import in American stores for a while, quietly, without ever getting an official English release, which might be the most SNES-era story imaginable. Most RPGs let you control a hero. This one starts by making you a disembodied spirit with no body of your own, forced to possess the living to survive. Glory of Heracles IV drops the series' namesake into a supporting role and instead centers on a young man from Atlantis caught in an impossible situation, neither alive nor dead. who must jump between bodies while the world around him unravels through Greek mythology references to Pandora's box, Atlantis, and the fates themselves. It focuses on identity displacement. You're not just playing a character, you're playing the absence of one, hopping between bodies and watching how that possession mechanic reshapes basic RPG traversal into something genuinely uncanny. I didn't expect a Greek mythology RPG to hit this hard emotionally, and I remember pausing after one particular possession sequence just to process what the game had actually done to me narratively. The sprite work is noticeably rougher than other late SNES RPGs, and if you're coming from something like Chrono Trigger, the visual downgrade is immediately obvious. Data East's last entry in this series before it went dormant for over a decade, and it might be the strangest, most ambitious one they ever made. If you're still here, you get exactly why I make these videos. Which of these have you actually tracked down and played? Subscribing genuinely keeps this channel alive. Before he ever touched a Zelda game, Eiji Aonuma made this, and Miyamoto liked it enough to hand him the entire Zelda franchise afterward. Marvelous follows three Boy Scouts hunting down a legendary pirate's hidden treasure while rescuing their kidnapped teacher, controlling all three characters simultaneously and splitting the group to solve environmental puzzles no single character could handle alone. This is about collaborative problem solving. You're never just moving one hero through a dungeon. You're coordinating three kids with different roles, and the satisfaction of a puzzle clicking because you split the party at exactly the right moment is unlike almost anything else on the system. I genuinely didn't know this existed until someone mentioned offhand that it's basically Aonuma's origin story. And once I started playing, I couldn't stop thinking about how much of Ocarina of Time's dungeon logic traces directly back here. The puzzle areas can sprawl uncomfortably large, and without a guide, backtracking to figure out what you missed gets tedious fast. If you love Zelda, you're looking at the blueprint that convinced Nintendo's most important designer he belonged on that team. This game lets you carry three entire parties into every single battle. Your story characters, a squad of hire mercenaries, and a set of summoned deity statues, and swap between them mid-fight. Silva Saga II follows an amnesiac swordsman racing to rescue the hero of the previous game, using a Dragon Quest-style turn-based system elevated by that three-party swap. Mercenaries hit hard but can't cast spells. Statues are fragile but devastating with magic, and neither group takes direct orders from you. You just decide when to bring them in. Battlefield management in every fight becomes a question of when to burn your mercenaries' raw power versus when to lean on statue magic, turning what looks like a standard turn-based battle into a resource timing puzzle. I remember losing a boss fight twice before realizing I'd been ignoring my statue party completely, and the moment I actually used them properly felt like discovering an entirely different game hiding inside the one I'd been playing. However, the game doesn't explain this system well at all, and you can spend hours underusing 2/3 of your available strategy without realizing it. Third in its trilogy, and criminally, the only one that never got any kind of English fan spotlight until years later. This is a Megami Tensei game that trades the franchise's usual post-apocalyptic Tokyo for a full medieval fantasy world. And it's the first entry in its spin-off series to land on a home console instead of a Game Boy screen. Last Bible 3 follows Seal, growing up in a town built around ancient machine magic called Gaia, as war and prophecy pull him away from home, while retaining the core Megami Tensei loop of negotiating with monsters, gauging their mood, and recruiting them into a fully customizable, levelable party alongside your human characters. You have to be diplomatic about recruitment. Every monster encounter is a conversation as much as a fight, watching a connection meter shift based on your answers, until a creature that could have killed you decides to fight beside you instead. I remember genuinely being disappointed the preset human characters kept outperforming the monsters I'd carefully recruited, and grappling with whether that was a flaw or just an honest lesson about where this game wanted my attention. Some reviewers found the storytelling here weaker than the mainline games, and the medieval setting can feel like a slightly safer, less distinctive version of what the series normally offers. It's the closing chapter of a trilogy most Western fans never knew existed, and it deserves to be mentioned in the same breath as the games that made this franchise legendary. This game had you building and defending an underground base against invading heroes a full year before Dungeon Keeper made that idea famous. Chaos Seed casts you as an earth mage restoring life to a dying world by constructing mystical rooms inside underground caverns, using a feng shui system where each room's placement and elemental alignment determines how much spiritual energy you can channel. All while surface-dwelling adventurers, furious that you exist, constantly storm your dungeon trying to kill you. Here you're simultaneously building something delicate and defending it in real time, fighting off invaders with action RPG combat, while never losing sight of the bigger resource management puzzle underneath. I remember trying to explain this game's feng shui system to a friend and just giving up halfway through, because the depth here is genuinely difficult to summarize in one sentence. You kind of have to feel it. The learning curve on the feng shui mechanics is steep enough that early hours can feel more confusing than fun, and the game doesn't do much to ease you into its own systems. Neverland Soft built something here that predates an entire beloved PC genre, and almost nobody credits them for it. This is a game about a literal dragon who transforms into a human just so he can walk among people he was never meant to touch. Emerald Dragon follows a young dragon who falls for a human girl raised among his kind before she returns to her own world, and finds himself under an ancient curse the moment he tries to follow her, drawing on Zoroastrian mythology for a setting genuinely unlike anything else on this list. Battles run on a time point system where every movement and attack drains a shared meter, forcing constant trade-offs between acting now or waiting for a better opening. It's a story about crossing a boundary you were never supposed to cross, just to stay close to someone, wrapped in combat that rewards patience as much as aggression. I laughed out loud at the post-credits outtakes this game includes, something I genuinely didn't expect from a story built around dragons risking everything for love. The SNES port made a handful of odd changes compared to earlier versions of this game, and depending what you play first, some choices will feel like unnecessary downgrades. A dragon disguised as a person, falling for a person he can never really have. That's a stranger, sadder premise than most RPGs ever attempted. This is a tactical RPG designed by the artist behind Trigun, built by the same studio that made Lufia, and it somehow lets you fully explore towns and dungeons between tightly designed grid battles. Energy Breaker follows an amnesiac woman drawn into a conflict over 4 mystical jewels, fighting across isometric battlefields where injured units literally lose action points as their health drops, meaning a wounded ally becomes weaker in real time, not just numerically. This is about tactical improvisation. Every fight becomes a puzzle about who to rush down before they can act again, and watching an enemy's effectiveness visibly crumble as you land hits feels genuinely satisfying in a way most tactics games never bother to show you. I lost track of how many hours I spent just wandering towns, poking at background objects for hidden items, completely ignoring the main quest because the world itself was that fun to dig through. But dialogue choices rarely change anything meaningful, and the amount of descriptive environment text can slow the pacing to a crawl if you're not in the mood to read. Taito published this, the same publisher behind Lufia, and honestly, it might be the better game. It's just the one nobody remembers. This was Square's final RPG for the Super Famicom, the last game before they moved on entirely, and it might be the best-looking 16-bit RPG the company ever made. Treasure of the Rudras splits its story across 3 fully separate scenarios, following a soldier, a priestess, and an archaeologist through 15 days that all interconnect, letting you freely switch between perspectives and watch how one character's choices ripple into another storyline. Its signature feature is a custom spell creation system where you build your own magic by combining prefixes and suffixes through trial and error, instead of just leveling up and waiting for new spells to unlock automatically. You're not just playing an RPG, you're inventing the tools you'll use to survive it, discovering combinations nobody explicitly told you existed. I spent an entire afternoon just experimenting with spell combinations before I'd made any real story progress, and I regret absolutely none of that time. The custom magic system is genuinely unintuitive at first, and without outside guidance, you'll waste real time on combinations that do almost nothing. Square went out swinging on this console, and somehow, the game they chose to end on is one almost nobody outside Japan has ever played. Picture an open-world RPG where the party isn't a group of heroes. It's a tank you built yourself, piece by piece, out of scavenged war machinery. Metal Max Returns drops you into a post-apocalyptic wasteland as a disowned bounty hunter kicked out by your own mechanic father, hunting monsters and outlaws for cash to survive. You customize your tank's main gun, secondary gun, side units, engine, and chassis independently, mixing and matching salvage parts into something that's entirely, uniquely yours. They aimed for total freedom. This is one of the earliest truly open-ended, non-linear RPGs on the system. No four-story path, no hand-holding, just a wasteland and your growing collection of increasingly ridiculous tank builds. I remember the exact moment I bolted a scavenged engine onto my starting rust bucket and watched it actually outrun enemies for the first time. That feeling of building something from junk into a war machine never got old. The story, however, is barely there by design. And if you need narrative momentum to stay engaged, this game will feel aimless in its opening hours. This is a Mad Max fever dream disguised as a Japanese RPG, and almost nobody outside Japan ever got to drive it. The original Paladin's Quest did something almost no RPG at the time dared to try. Magic costs you health instead of mana. This sequel takes that idea and makes it hurt even more. Lennus II follows Ferris on a quest for 4 sacred orbs to prevent planetary catastrophe, inheriting that same HP-draining magic system from its predecessor while expanding the story into something far darker, including the total destruction of an entire world you visit early on and the deaths of nearly everyone living there. It's desperate survival. Every spell you cast is a bet against your own health bar, turning even routine battles into constant risk assessment that most RPGs never ask of you. I actually started learning Japanese partly because of this game, refusing to accept I couldn't understand a story I could tell was building towards something much bigger than a typical SNES plot. But battles can drag against large enemy groups, and several reviewers have pointed out that some bosses feel weaker than the grind leading up to them. Enix had already abandoned support by the time this released. This came out anyway, unsupported and unlocalized, and it's better than it had any right to be. Every game on this list got outshined by 2 of the greatest RPGs ever made, and history basically forgot they existed because of it, but forgotten isn't the same as bad. So tell me, out of these, which one are you adding to your list? Subscribe if you want more of these deep dives, because finding games like this and getting to talk about them with people who actually care is exactly why I keep this channel going.